Welcome, everybody tuning in on YouTube and LinkedIn. Welcome to VUX Voice AI podcast, where we delve into the details of how you can use voice technology, conversational AI, to help you improve processes, generate revenue, save costs, etc., etc. And I'm joined as always by Dustin Coates. How do we, Dustin?
It's going pretty well. How are you doing, Kane?
Very well. Just saying about how nice your backdrop's looking. I'm
Oh,
incredibly jealous.
thanks.
I've got to get a green screen, but you're looking. It's looking pretty cool over there.
Yeah, it won't be my backdrop for much longer. This is the to-be nursery, so it's I'm squatting here until the real tenant arrives.
Nice. When is that again? October?
End of October, yeah, coming up.
Wow. Your world is about to be rocked, my friend.
Yeah.
But congratulations. And welcome to Einav Itamar, CEO of Voca.ai, doing some really interesting stuff in the call center space. Einav, welcome.
Hi, Kane. Thank you so much for you and Dustin for having me here. I'm so excited.
No worries. It's nice to have you along. We've been doing a bit of a theme lately, Dustin, haven't we? Kind of IVR in the contact center, and it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah, it really has. Really interested to hear what you're going to tell us today. It's, I think there has been a little bit of a change in our focus recently. I wouldn't say maybe a change in our focus, but a bit of an evolution on the things we talk about. So excited to learn a little bit more and have our audience learn a little bit more as well today.
And if you do want to learn a little bit more in general about voice, conversational AI, voice technology, stuff like that, Bradley Metrock from Project Voice and This Week in Voice has got a pretty good newsletter going at the moment. It's only been going for a week or so. And Dustin, we were featured in it yesterday or the day before.
It's exciting. Yeah. How'd you feel about that? How'd you feel waking up and seeing your face in your email inbox?
Yeah, it was weird. You don't often hear other people writing about you, so it was you're often trying to write about yourself. so it was good. Yeah, a couple of quotes I liked was that Kane gave a rousing closing talk at Project Voice, and Dustin is making waves with his book, and so there we go.
Yeah, that Bradley Medrock knows how to build a guy up for sure. So thanks to Bradley for that.
And another one was, I'll give you another one, which I liked as well. The voice and AI industry has their fair share of colourful characters, but none quite as bright, perhaps, as Kane and Dustin. So there you go. If you want more of that kind, it's not all praise for VUX World, don't worry. There is all kinds of interesting stuff going on in that newsletter. So thisweekinvoice.substack.com if you want to get involved in that. I don't suppose you are involved in that, Einav?
No, didn't get a chance to be involved there, but looking forward also to make waves, just like Dustin.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it sounds like you're making waves already of sorts with Voca.ai. Tell us a little bit about what Voca.ai is and does.
Yeah, sure. So maybe first of all, just I've been in this space for the past 15 years of both AI and big data, machine learning, you name it, all the buzzwords. And I co-founded an AI company that was also very exciting and was later acquired by eBay. And then I met Dr. Alan Becker, who is the other co-founder of Voca. And we both were very excited about all the advancement in voice AI and in NLP. And we saw how the giants, how the big tech companies invest in smart speakers and those smart voice assistants. So when it comes to B2C experiences, people got the experience to be better, but then on the other hand, the voice experience for customer service was quite a lot behind. So we asked ourselves, does it really has to be like this? So this is basically how Voca started. We met and we both had this background of both the technology and also the understanding of what it can do and what it cannot do. And we wanted to use this in order to solve this everlasting context-centered trade-off. And when I'm talking this trade-off, I'm talking about the trade-off between customer experience, scale, and cost, basically. And we believed when we co-founded Voca 3 years ago that this trade-off is not necessary, and we can solve it using technology. Eventually, we also thought that it's the right time to do this because people are more open to conversational AI and trust this technology a little bit more than they used to be. And eventually, at the end of the day, customers want what they want and they want it fast. So if the experience is good, they are willing to adopt AI to help them do what they want to do. So when we started, we just wanted to leverage the existing technology in order to solve this problem. But we quickly learned that if we really want to make an impact, if we really want to make an experience that is at least as good as speaking with a human, we need to rethink the whole technology. We need to rethink the whole solution. I'm going to talk maybe about this a little bit later about how our approach is different, but we decided to develop an end-to-end technology and solution for our customers and to make it extremely easy for them to adopt AI, at this time. And, in the past 6 months, we also saw what COVID-19 made to the world. And in our space, it's made, the sense of urgency quite clear that companies need to optimize. They need to learn how to handle these kind of extreme situations and unknowns and still being able to provide great customer experience with the peaks. And, when all of a sudden people prefer to use their phone instead of stepping into a bank, for example, companies still are expected to be able to handle these huge amount of calls. And still at the same time, if you are using technology, if they are using technology in order to provide these calls during the COVID, they are still expected to be empathetic and to, there is no compromise on the customer experience, right? So this is where our solution came in to be proven very useful because we wanted to make our bot as human and as empathetic as possible. So, in the times of COVID, it got to be more relevant than ever. So as of today, our virtual agents make millions of calls per month for our customers around the world, mainly in the US, most of them in the US. Also, in the UK, we have several customers, and also in Australia, in Germany, and many other regions as well. That's basically what we do. Just trying to constantly improve the experience for our customers and to build customer experience solutions at scale.
So, for those who are who've never come across Voca.ai, it is a platform. Would you describe it as a platform, technology that enables you to automate incoming calls into the contact center using conversational AI? Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, that's correct. We are automating both incoming and outbound calls using AI. We are also providing solutions for omnichannel on top of it. Many other companies that are chatbot companies are trying to go into the space of voice, but then the experience that you get is, not really suitable because voice is much more complex than a mere chat. But we went the other way around. We first created a solution that is good for the contact center, and now we're also starting to provide a solution for other channels and to provide also an omnichannel and cross-channel solutions, across messaging and chat, website, in-app, and many other channels as well around this, because eventually customers today expect to get the best service across all the different channels and to get it also to be consistent and fluent. Yeah.
So you were talking a bit earlier on about trade-offs, contact center trade-offs, and how you develop the platform to try and counteract some of that. Can you elaborate a little bit on what kind of trade-offs you're referring to there?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I think that since there is such thing as customer service, there is always a trade-off between, the companies, our clients that want to provide good customer experience, but on the other hand, there are costs for providing good customer experience, and especially It comes into play when there is a bigger scale. So as telecommunication companies and banks, as they grow in number of customers and number of agents, it becomes more and more challenging to keep the level of customer experience and still keep the costs same. So eventually, as customers, what we experience when we are calling is we experience long waiting times. we experience sometimes inexperienced agents or offshore agents with maybe limited access to the internal systems or
poor bandwidth and stuff like that, maybe.
Yeah. So then, on the other hand, when companies try to solve these scalability issues and use technologies like IVRs, then again they throw their customers into a maze, right? That is not great customer experience. And then sometimes they try to overcome this using trying to divert customers into other channels that are more scalable, like email and chat and so on. But eventually, still, customers are still calling. And again, we see this during COVID more and more again, because if you want something and you want it now, you still need to call. So it's not one or the other. You need to provide great customer experience across channels. And I think that if chatbots were like a trend 2 or 3 years ago, now it's clear that voice is as important as chat, and you need to provide, again, a solution across channels and make sure that you don't leave voice as like a subflow that is, completely different to chat.
It's interesting that you mentioned, or what you mentioned earlier makes me think about how a lot of times customer service can actually be a differentiator of sorts. It can be a competitive advantage for certain companies. I know in the US, you've got a handful of companies that are just like really known for good customer service, like a JetBlue, a Trader Joe's. Maybe there's some in the UK as well, Kane. Any companies that spring to mind that you're like, okay, yeah, I don't mind calling them.
Yeah, well, I think John Lewis typically tend to have a pretty good customer service. But another one from, I think it's the US, is Tom's Shoes. Don't know if you've heard their stories where, some of their agents have spent like 20, 30 minutes on the call with someone and something, I think any complaints, they end up just giving you a new pair of shoes and stuff like that. And then there's another one about a flower. There's another one about a flower company where they missed a delivery to someone's, there was an important delivery. It wasn't a birthday, it was something else. And they missed the delivery. The person phoned up and they ended up giving them free flowers, not announced, just free flowers every month, constantly after that for making one mistake. So, but it just shows how important it is to have good customer service, because people like me who have nothing to do with it tell stories about it.
Yeah, but that's got to be really expensive, right? If you're going to be willing to stay on the phone for hours with a human. So I guess does Voca.ai and this AI-driven customer service help companies close that gap a little bit when it comes to that customer service advantage?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. You mentioned several companies that put customer experience, before costs, and first of all want, not just to automate, but first of all make sure that that customer experience comes first. So this is our ideal customer. So for instance, American Express is also well known in the US, in their ability and willingness to invest quite a lot in order to provide great customer experience. So when we met with them initially, they were very excited about us, both from the ventures unit and innovation and the different business units. So that got us into a place where they invested in us. They are one of our trusted partners, and we are. This is again one example for a great company that believes in us and knows the importance of great customer experience and not just automation.
And when I think about the really good customer experiences that I've had, and American Express is certainly one of them. I think to those times when a person has helped me. I don't necessarily think about a computer system, but it's certainly in a lot of cases where I've had a bad experience, I think about those computer systems that don't work. So I guess my question is, how much influence does an intelligent system, how much influence can it have on having a good experience versus how much is it trying to mitigate those bad experiences? Like what's the balance between where the AI really helps this experience shine and where is it that the human helps the experience shine?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe that the right solution is basically a win-win. Some people see AI or technology in general as something that competes with humans. This is not the way we see it. We see this as how to create the ideal experience that combines both people and AI. And no matter how much I'll try to convince you that AI is amazing and can do anything, eventually it has its limits, and we all know it. So AI is more geared towards mundane and repetitive tasks, and humans are not geared to do that. So that's actually, how they can complete each other and work together in a synergetic mode. So this is where Voca comes in. We take we start with a specific flows, and we first make sure that we can cover them. And usually it's, like the low-hanging fruits or the 80-20 rule. We'll try to take, and almost any, I think that we didn't meet even one customer that didn't have such a very simple answer, like, what is your most common reason for people to call you? Or from the other side, what is the most top reason for you to call people? I can give several examples, but generally speaking, there's always a reason, or maybe 2 or 3 top reasons that would cover 80% of the call volumes. So we would try to first cover this. And also, if you limit to those 2 or 3 reasons, obviously there's always the unexpected. So you can, the AI can cover, to the happy path, obviously, and also to many other alternative paths. But then eventually there's a point or a specific percentage of calls, say 10 or 20% of the calls, that you would eventually want to forward to a human being that might be from different reasons. One reason would be the most simple one, that the person would ask to speak with a human being. And we always respect that. And we always respect the fact that some people would always prefer that. That's fine. And by the way, surprisingly, that's a really low percentage of the calls. That's one thing to note. Another reason for people, for calls to be forwarded is based on a specific business logic. For instance, you might want to handle, let's say in a sales process, you might want to handle the initial qualification process, like a lead screening, for instance. You would like to handle this using AI. So you have a series of questions for an insurance broker or a series of questions for a lender. So those questions, again, are mundane, and the business logic is quite clear and well-defined. From the other end, you still want to make the experience amazing because it is a sales process. So this is where we excel. So you put this initial process screening, you put it for the AI. So then you have those 10% that would go through the screening process and are interested in the insurance. And you can also, there is also a match for that you can provide them. For instance, you would like only people in the age of 40 to 62, and that they have a specific health condition and so on and so forth. So only those calls will be forwarded to the human agent. And obviously there's the third reason that we cannot ignore, that again, sometimes the AI hits a limit that it cannot answer a specific question. And then the call, in this case, it will always also be forwarded to a human agent. So again, it's a synergy. It's not one instead of the other.
Interesting. We've got a couple of questions coming through through LinkedIn. Shout out to Michael Nelson and Courtney Lindberg. One of them is related actually to what you were just talking about, and then we'll come on to yours after that, Michael, when we get into actually how do you go about implementing some of this stuff. So Courtney's asking, how are you able to handle obstacles and failures of varying accents or due to differences in pitch and things like that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, we developed the entire technology stack from scratch. We, the general approach would be to take speech, convert it to text, and then try to use NLP to analyze the text. We have a completely different approach. We analyze the NLP part. We do it directly on the speech signal. This allows us a huge amount of boost in accuracy. It will also allows us to handle emotion. So back to the question that is related, if you would take speech out of context and try to translate it to text, so when it comes to accents and background noises and low quality of a phone line, which is always the case, even human beings, and I can challenge you on this, if I give you just a specific 3 seconds of audio, you will not be able to understand the sentence. But if you put context into it, and if you do both tasks together, both the understanding and the listening using the same engine. So you have much better chance of succeeding because you can miss a lot of the specifics, but because you know the context, you can understand if this person is now positive or negative. You can understand if he's saying that he is interested or not, and you can understand if he's challenging you on that question or that. So to cut a long story short, we incorporate context and we do it deeply in order to overcome challenges with any kind of acoustic challenges, if you will. So that's one specific answer to this question. The other one is, I would say, the generic answer, that we simply train on huge amounts of data from all around the world in many different accents and regions. So that allows us to be more robust to the different ways that people express themselves and simple and different accents around the world.
And when you say that you take context into consideration, are you talking context that is kind of generated from either the kind of intent that someone has or the intent that you're catering for, or you're talking context as in you might be able to match something in and around the sentence that they've said, but maybe it's not all of it? How do you mean when you say that you take context into consideration as well as just the speech?
Basically, it's both and much more than this. Just a very simple example. If I ask you a question right now, and I'm listening to you answering it, my question is the context, right? I'm not expecting you to just say any random sentence. I would expect you to either answer my question or maybe, surprise me with something in the same topic, but slightly different. So we know how to use that. And we also know how to use other information about the domain, about the different entities in the call, and many other relevant information in order to improve the accuracy and also take emotion into account.
Cool. Well, Frederick Goosens did have a question on LinkedIn, which I think you've answered, which is, do you have your own NLU? Sounds as though the answer is yes, given that you've built everything from end to end. If we were going to cover this kind of towards the end, but Michael's asked the question and he's been patient with us putting it to you. So someone wants to kind of, considering Voca.ai, wanting to use conversational technologies to help them improve what they're doing in their call center, to help automate calls, etc. How would you integrate, this is Michael's question, how would you integrate your solution with an existing contact center platform?
Yeah. So, this is a great question. So basically, as I mentioned, we are providing an end-to-end solution for our customers. We take care for all of the heavy lifting. So when we have a new customer or a new use case to support, then we would typically have a process of how to onboard a new customer. This process would include discovery meetings to learn about how things are done today. Then we'll use our experience to recommend our best practices to incorporate AI into those existing flows. So that is one part, the flow building process. And then the other part of it is the integrations. We integrate to the call-centric technology. Usually it's, I would call it, that would be the SIP integration usually. And then the other part is the information system integration that we are supporting various types of CRM systems that are most common. And also if it's a proprietary system that is quite using standard protocols, we can also support that.
And is there any types of systems that exist that are easier or harder to integrate with? For example, I was talking to someone earlier on who was saying that quite a lot of relatively large enterprises are still running on-prem solutions. However, there's a huge movement now to put everything in the cloud. You've got Amazon Connect, you've got Nice in Contact, Genesis. All of those have now got cloud offerings and are trying to kind of get people up into the cloud. And obviously over the COVID time, which we're going to kind of touch on in a moment, some contact centers have wanted people to work from home because they haven't been able to open the office, and some of those, maybe the people with on-prem installations, have found things a little bit harder than people who are running companies that are running the cloud-based stuff. So is there a difference in how you would approach integrating Voca.ai into contact center software, depending on whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, or does it not really matter? Is there any difference in the process?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked this, because I wanted to talk about this. First of all, one of the byproducts for the decision to build the entire technology stack in-house was security, because now we managed to basically ensure our customers that their data is safe with us. As opposed to a company that would take one part of the AI and then send, let's say, the speech recognition to an external ASR public API, for instance, and then use the text to speech from another provider and only do the NLP in-house, and so on and so forth. So one byproduct, as I mentioned, is security, that we can ensure that, and it's very important for the financial institutions that we work with, and actually any other company in the world, I guess. It's very important for them to know that their customer data is safe, and no privacy issues are there. With the GDPR and CCPA, it's also very important. So we managed to provide this and make sure that the data stays within our domain. And also, when it comes to on-prem versus cloud, we've seen all the companies switching to cloud. Some companies that do prefer on-prem initially, I cannot mention names, but even the most Fortune 100s, huge companies of ours that I would never believe that would go to the cloud, would eventually are now more open to it. And again, COVID definitely helped with that, I would say. But technically speaking, we can, our technology is cloud agnostic, so we can deploy to any cloud, and you can also wrap it and deploy it on-prem. I have to admit that until now, we didn't, luckily for us, we didn't need to deploy it on-prem because, as I mentioned, even the biggest and the most traditional customers of ours eventually are open to the cloud because they see that our environment is super secure, and we have all the compliance needed in order to ensure them that their data is safe with us.
What about the contact center system itself then? Is there a difference between, so it sounds as though your clients and customers are happy to have your side of the kind of bargain in the cloud. What about in terms of how they're set up? So if I am, I don't know, John Lewis, we mentioned John Lewis earlier on. If I'm John Lewis and I've got an on-prem kind of contact center running in my organization, I've got a box in the IT sort of back room with everything kind of running on it. Is there a difference in terms of how you would integrate into that if someone's running like an on-prem installation versus running something like Amazon Connect, which is the contact center software itself is entirely cloud-based?
Usually the telephony piece, again, there are two different types of integration. One of it would be to actually plug into the private branches, the private telephony. And again, even the most traditional companies have some sort of a SIP bridge. So that would be easy. And then if it's not easy enough, there's always an option to just use the PSTN. Even if the entire telephony is the contact center, they're still reaching out to customers and they're still receiving calls from customers. So it is a publicly available service. So we can simply forward calls or receive calls from the system based on the public telephony. So that's the easiest integration. And many customers choose to start with this type of integration and only later on move forward to the more tight integration after they see value.
And so you mentioned early on, in part of the process of getting on board with Voca is the design of the conversational IVR. Can you walk us through that design process? How do you start that off? How do you test that? How does that then go into production? What goes into designing that conversation?
Yeah, so we have a team of conversation design specialists and implementation specialists, and post-sale engineers and solution architects and so on. and the entire team is involved in the process. There's always like a dedicated account manager and a technical account manager that is allocated to the onboarding, and they're responsible to make the onboarding process as smooth as possible. And the initial, part of it is just have like a kickoff meeting and collect all the information needed for the design. We also listen to calls, and we see that we get all the all the specifics of what can happen in a call, because sometimes the training documents, theory and practice is quite different. So we always insist on getting at least several examples of actual calls, and we use this to design a conversation. This goes through a massive QA process. And would also go through the approval of the customers. Sometimes people imagine AI as a black box that would just do anything, but this is really different than what we do for many reasons. One reason is that technology is still not there. It's still not a black box that could learn anything and do anything. And the second reason is more important, is because it would not be useful to any business if you have a black box that can simply say, insult customers and do any stuff.
Go rogue.
Any response of the virtual agent would be pre-approved by our customers to make sure that it meets their business needs, and it meets their compliance requirements and regulation. So that would be roughly the process, building it, confirming it, and testing it.
So on that note, you mentioned something that made me think of something related, which is, what do you think of these new technologies, this NLG? I'm sure you've seen a lot of what's been going around with GPT-3, for example. What do you think about that? And do you think that has a hand in the future of these conversation designs?
Yeah, definitely in the future. I think that right now it's still not production ready. This specific model seems to be amazing. I had the luck to get an access to this API and spoke with this creature a little bit. So I have to say that although it's quite exciting, I think that what is on the social networks and everything, it's more like a cherry picking, to be honest with you. Spoiler alert, if you will get a chance to experience it yourself, it's still has many glitches and still not something that you want to put in front of your customers. I do believe that in the future, I don't think it's the near future, but I believe that I would say in the next 3, maybe 2 to 5 years, this kind of technologies will be more useful to many different use cases, and hopefully also for the customer experience domain as well.
Are there other 2023, 2025 technologies that you're excited about here in 2020?
Yeah, I think the speech synthesis has gone through a huge progress in the past year or two. There was WaveNet, and there were other advances in this field. I'm also glad that we had a chance to again develop our own technology in this space, and we're also using partners to specific other cases. So I believe that there's also going to be progress in this front. So I guess that you can say about speech synthesis that currently, the WaveNets of the world can provide quite a smooth human sounding voice, but it still cannot incorporate emotion properly. Prosody, so the music of the speech is still not right, and it's hard to control it. And I think that in Voca, we made an impact over there as well. It's still not something generic that could be used for, we cannot use a generic API for text to speech. It's not what we do. But internally, we have our own, I would say, best practices and techniques in order to create a text to speech that is even one level more than the state of the art that is currently publicly available.
How much how much are you using synthesized speech, text-to-speech systems today, and how much are you using pre-recorded responses? Is it a mixture? Is it per project? How do you decide about that?
Yeah, so I mean that goes to the lines of my previous answer. We are using both. That's a part of the technique. We are using both pre-recorded and synthetic voice. We have voice actors that we work with in order to train a text-to-speech engine that would match their voices. We only need about 1 hour of recorded speech from a voice actor in order to create a text-to-speech engine that would match their voice. And then we have on top of this technology that could help create templates, if you will, to match specific prosody, and then you could use those templates in order to create dynamic responses that would be, as I mentioned, one step on top or above what is currently publicly available as a generic text compared to a generic text-to-speech engine.
You know what we should do, Dustin?
What's that?
We've got hours worth of our audio kicking around. I'm sure with a little bit of TLC that we could probably spin up a synthetic voice of ourselves. Right. So what we should do is a little spin-off of this episode where we create some synthetic voices of all three of us, and then we just have a little 5-minute episode of VUX World, all with synthetic voices. How good would that be?
I have to say, Ken and Dustin, I'm not sure that you really want to do this, because then eventually what will you do the next day?
I mean, but how do people know that this is not currently synthesized voices? It's gonna be a combination of synthesized voices, deepfakes. Really, I'm just on my couch sipping on a Mai Tai right now is what I'm doing.
That's class. That is good. That's interesting, because we're going to come to your question in a second, Courtney. By the way, but I'm glad that you've put so much effort into the text to speech, because it's so easy just to pick up the standard out of the box kind of off the shelf sort of TTS engines and stuff like that. But if you look at something like, some of the stuff that ReadSpeaker are doing and some of the other kind of providers who've been working on this kind of stuff, it is possible to get them sounding pretty good, like not humanistic. The voice surfer from Germany is pretty decent, but they're not human, but they sound a hell of a lot better than they did even like 3 years ago. So I'm glad to see you kind of putting a lot of effort into that. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what you were talking there around how you manipulate the kind of emotion? So usually for those people who haven't designed this stuff before, you would use something like SSML, which allows you to increase the pitch, decrease the pitch, speed up words, add emphasis, make the bot pronounce certain words in a certain way. So is it SSML that you're using, or have you done something totally different that is allowing you to get that kind of variance in how you're talking?
Yeah, so we both do SSML, but the SSML would again get you to a specific level and not more than this. So eventually, as I mentioned earlier, we have a technique that would allow to take a pre-recorded message and replace a word or a phrase out of it. So that would be maybe not the most accurate way to describe it, but quite close to it. So it's much more complex than this, obviously, because you don't want it. It's not like combining recordings together. You want basically to synthesize voice that would match as much as possible to how you want it to sound. So this is basically our capability. And again, right now it's not something generic that we can let anyone use. But we do it internally for our customers in order to make sure that the experience is human. And I'm a big believer in this, that it's a very important part of the experience. It's not the only thing that makes the experience human-like. And I know that you were interested to learn more about what makes an experience human. So the speech and the prosody is one thing. The other thing is also obviously the accuracy of how well it understands and how well it would respond relevance to the user's input. And also on top of this, there are many other factors, such as how responsive it is, how quickly it would respond. and many other nuances. So eventually, as I mentioned, we decided to build the entire experience. And also, by the way, when we design the flow itself, that's also when we have to make some tough decisions in order to, to make sure that the flow itself is human friendly. So, for instance, if you're now calling, let's say, a specific company, a specific financial institution, so the most easiest for Voca, and we want, let's say that we want to route the call. So the most easiest part for Voca would be to say sales if you want sales, say customer service if you want customer service, but that's not good customer experience. So again, even when building the flow, we always make the decision that is harder for us, but better for the end user, better for the customer. So in that case, obviously, the best thing to do would be to simply say, how can we help you, right? And then the heavy lifting should be done on our side, not the other way around. So traditionally, IVRs and other similar technologies was doing it differently. As I mentioned, they required us as humans to adjust ourselves to the machine. And our approach always, in every step of the way, that the AI should adjust itself to humans and make them feel as comfortable as possible. I hope it makes sense.
That's interesting. That was one of the things that I was mentioning. I think I've done one of the posts on LinkedIn about it, which was that whether you should start out the conversation as well. I think actually what I said was that I've come across some in the past that say in your own words describe why you're calling, and then whenever I hear that phrase, I always think like it's a Billy Connolly piece where he says, "What, you think I've got my own words? Who would I talk to?" So it's like, but the sentiment is still there, which is that just you say anything, and we'll deal with it, kind of thing. And is that one of the kind of mistakes that you see? It's definitely something that you see, Dustin, isn't it? You see it all the time with Alexa skills and stuff like that, where it essentially turns into an IVR menu, doesn't it? Sometimes. Is that one of the things? Is that one of the things that you're seeing in that? Some of the bigger mistakes that people are making is treating it like a tree and not letting people just speak in their own language.
Yeah, definitely. You asking me or Dustin?
Yeah, I was going to ask Kane.
That's to anyone who will answer it. Let's start with you, Dustin, and then we'll go to you, Einav.
Yeah, I would say so, but I'm actually more interested in hearing in your thoughts, Einav.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's when you structure conversation like a tree, so it's easier for you as the AI vendor to make it more accurate. That's why I think that other companies would choose that. I also have to say, by the way, that in order to be fair, that Alexa's task is much more wide. They have to provide one flow that would support almost any possible input in the world. In our case, it's different. We deploy several different bots to different customers. So it's much more well-defined. Even though that there might be many different reasons for people to call, it's still obviously they will not call a bank in order to, I don't know, to buy a dog.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you're not dealing with everything from music to calendars to reminders to all kinds of stuff. You're dealing with a very kind of narrow sort of use case. One of the things Courtney Lindbergh has asked as well is, are you seeing different speeds of adoption by different industries? So, for example, is healthcare and banking earlier than like hospitality, for example?
So we currently we see a huge demand from financial services, banks, lenders, credit card companies, insurance companies. I think that today there is like people call it fintech and insurtech trends. So I believe that we also might experience the same trend. They are much more open for innovation than they used to be in the past. They are looking to innovate in order to improve any KPIs in their business. One We also see a similar trend from the telecommunication companies as well, healthcare to a certain extent as well. I guess those are the main sectors that we see active demand coming from those sectors.
And we did say that we were going to get onto COVID, and I think we should probably do that before we run out of time. We've kind of touched on things in pieces and places and stuff like that. But last time we spoke, you were talking about how, the whole COVID thing and how, some of your customers, current customers, are even wanting to either do more, or there's been kind of an influx of new customers as they try to manage the demand and all that kind of stuff. And maybe we'll get into some of the specifics, but in kind of summary, how have you found what kind of trends have you seen, should we say, throughout the whole lockdown period and stuff like that when it comes to contact centers and AI?
Yeah. So basically what happened during COVID to contact centers is, in general to companies that like, banks or other, insurance companies that have contact centers, is that first of all, they had to deal with working from home and with social distancing. So that drastically reduced their agent capacity. And at the same time, for the reasons we described earlier, people simply called more. They are now at home. They're now not going anywhere, and definitely not going to attend your specific branch of the bank. So those two reasons combined increased the waiting times like tenfold, and sometimes even more. And also it created like a demand for more specific responses to frequently asked questions that are related to the current situations. So for instance, we can discuss like the PPP loans and or maybe people calling healthcare institutions to ask a specific healthcare related, COVID related question, and so on and so forth. So we've seen all that, and we've seen companies strive to solve these huge waiting times by call deflection and self-service routes and so on and so forth. So we've seen this with new customers. We've seen this with existing customers, that the volumes of number of calls that are routed to Voca grew up exponentially, and they also wanted to implement more and more use cases and to cover a higher percentage of the calls that we can support. And yeah, basically that made a drastic impact on Voca. Obviously, COVID-19 is not such a great situation for us as a society. But yeah, in Voca, it's such, I would say, a bittersweet situation for us because it did brought demand for our business.
We were talking before about how the whole COVID thing has brought certain behaviors forward. I think it was a Forrester's report that said that the people who should be shopping online or forecast to be shopping online in 3 years' time were all shopping online during lockdown because there's no other way of getting food, kind of thing. And so that's one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, isn't it, Dustin, in terms of how the adoption of this technology is probably being brought forward because of you've got to do it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not necessarily a sea change, it's an evolution, or maybe a slight push towards that evolution that perhaps was going to happen anyway.
What impact have you seen from your customers that have either brought in new kind of conversations to deal with, or because people are now asking them about freezing credit card payments or whatever the case may be? What kind of examples have you seen, and then what kind of success have you seen? You mentioned earlier on about taking 80% of the calls and focusing on the kind of like the top queries and stuff like that. What have you got any kind of numbers or any kind of like impactful insights that you've seen from people implementing some of this stuff over the COVID?
Yeah, of course. We have done different types of scenarios and calls. Because you guys are based in the UK, maybe I'll choose one UK-based customer.
Well, Dustin's in Paris, so if you've got any in France as well, then either the UK or Paris will do.
Yeah, let's start with UK, then we'll see about France. So one of our customers, electricity provider called Utilita. I'm not sure if you heard about them, but they are based in the UK. They're a big electricity provider. So we actually made something that I'm really proud of. It's pretty cool. We help people get their electricity back on in their home, which is, again, it's quite complicated use case if you think about it, because you have to make sure that they are at home and right now, and they can, you need to explain to them how to find the meter, and then you have to wait for them just in the background. And when you're waiting for them, they're speaking to their spouse and so on and so forth. And once they reach the meter, they have to follow a specific instructions of how to get it back on. So we managed to succeed in 75% of the calls in getting the electricity back on. We worked with the customer to do all the, as I mentioned, all the onboarding, the integration we needed and everything, and to implement the flow. Hopefully we are going to expand the service to gas as well, not just electricity, and also to other scenarios as well, and also to increase the coverage from 75% to even higher amount of coverage. And it's also nice to hear people say thank you, to the virtual agent. They're excited that they managed to, to get the light back on in these times. Maybe another example would be, you mentioned earlier, the situation of people calling up in order to ask, about delinquency issues and ask to pay later their credit card debt and so on. Also, we also have such a use case in the US where we handle both inbound and outbound debt collection calls. And again, this situation was already big before COVID, and now it got to be more big. There's about $15 trillion, debt in the US, and student loans is trillions, and mortgages is tens of trillions. And if you just pinpoint even one small area, just tiny area in debt, it's a huge problem in the US. And again, it's a scale problem for those companies that need to eventually to collect this money or need to answer the calls and answer questions. So, and it definitely, the empathy component here is super important. So I'm glad again that we managed to help over there as well. And it's actually amazing to see, we measured like what human agents do when it comes to debt collection. So we found out for one of our customers that 86% of their talk time is simply just trying to reach people over the phone. In this time, they get voicemails, they get, the spouse, they get people at work, they get busy people, and many other reasons. And only in 14% of the talk time, they're actually negotiating and receiving payments and actually speaking with the card member or the relevant person to even talk about the subject. So again, this is where it comes to play, is the synergy between AI and humans, because people don't need to spend 86% of their time over the phone in just leaving voicemail messages. That doesn't make any sense. And when it comes to the complex part of the negotiation and understanding the situation of the person in the other side, in this part, AI still has some work to do. So in this part, maybe it makes sense to hand it over to a human agent, or at least in some of the cases, it makes sense. So this is where the synergy comes into play.
Some of the debt collection kind of, recouping debt, some of that also requires not just people on the phone, but people actually physically go into people's houses. I've got a story about that, which is that one day when we used to live in our old flat before we moved into here, there was a knock on the door, and you used to have to go through our front door to get to our flat door. Knock on the door, and there's a guy there with this like stab-proof vest on and stuff like that, and he's asking for my wife. I said, she's not here, she's at work. And he said, I've got a something to go and take away your car. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And I was just about to close the door because I thought he was winding me up, but he had his foot in the door. So anyway, I ended up letting him in. Turns out that we'd moved for our flat. We'd moved about 6 weeks earlier. And on the M25, if you go over Dartford Bridge, you have to pay a toll. If you don't pay the toll, you end up getting fines and stuff like that, and you get like warrants out and stuff. And we didn't pay the toll, didn't realize all the stuff was getting sent to our old flat, and someone comes over trying to take our car off us. And I don't know where they got our new address from, but they're knocking on the door. End up paying £205.
So you see, years after, you remember a bad experience that you had. So it's a very sensitive area, and it's a very important topic. So again, our job here is to make sure that we make it as empathetic as possible and as sensitive as possible, and to keep the privacy of those customers and make sure that the experience is amazing as much as possible.
Nice. So how do people get started then? How do people get up and running with, there's lots of people out there who have call centers, lots of people now thinking about this kind of technology. The more people you speak to these days, everyone's kind of heard of Alexa now. Everyone knows about voice in inverted commas. How do people get started and up and running with Voca.ai if they wanted to do so?
So the easiest part would be to go into our website and leave their details. I guess that would be the first part. Then we walk through the process of demoing our product and discussing what are their needs and to see if there's a match. As I mentioned, the first question, I guess, to be asked is, can you think about where to start? I mean, what are the low-hanging fruits you want to automate? You don't automate 100% of the calls in day one. Ideally, you would take the most common types of calls and then focus on automating them. That would get a huge amount of value, a huge great ROI, and also eventually a reduction in waiting times for the customers. So that would also end up in a better customer experience overall. So that would be the first question. Then we go through the details and try to design and define the ideal experience. And again, we are doing all the heavy lifting. All we need from our clients is to be able to, in a sense, to train a new agent, train their first virtual agent, as simply as it sounds. This is what we expect them to do.
Cool. Any thoughts, Dustin? Any final questions, final thoughts?
No, I thought this was great. I think we might need to have you on again in the future. We left some on the floor, so I think there's some more to discuss in the future. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me here.
Cool. Where can people? You mentioned the website. What is the website? Where can people go to reach out?
So that's easy. Just like Voca.ai.
Cool. Nice one. Cool. Well, yes, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Courtney and Michael, for the questions. And look forward to doing it again sometime. Look forward also to the next episode of the podcast, which is me, Einav, and Dustin in synthetic voice mode, playing out another conversation in another couple of weeks. So until that time, we'll see you later.
Thank you so much. Thank you.